Hello everyone, welcome back. This video we're going to talk a little bit about chapter 13, the last chapter from the Helicopter Flying Handbook, which is all about effective aeronautical decision making. Now, a lot of this stuff is the same between helicopters and airplanes, right? People are making bad decisions. How can they make better decisions? So I'm not really going to get into a lot of detail from this chapter because we're going to cover it in the ground school where we talk about Rod Machado's book. Now, I will point out this introduction to this chapter, and they talk about the accident rate for helicopters being higher than that of fixed-wing aircraft. And why is that? Well, the big reason for that is the fact that helicopters can do things that nothing else can. If you look at commercial helicopter pilots, their accident rate is much higher than fixed wing. Why is that? Well, what are they doing? They're getting into tight places. You have, the EMS people. They're getting into some little road that's lined with trees and power lines to go to an accident site. You have firefighters who are using a helicopter for firefighting. You have sometimes helicopters being used for ag spraying. Why are they using a helicopter? Well, maybe it's so tight they can't really even get an airplane in there. So they're going to use a helicopter for that. Maybe you're slinging a load from a helicopter. Maybe you have some people on the skids of your helicopter and they're repairing high tension lines or, who knows what. So there's a lot of situations where you're using a helicopter because you can't use anything else. And those tend to be hazardous situations. So when it comes to aeronautical decision making in a helicopter, it's perhaps maybe even more important than with fixed wing. It's much easier to get yourself into trouble in a helicopter than in a fixed wing aircraft. It takes no time. If you want to make a comparison, think back, if you have any fixed wing experience, your first flight lesson, your instructor is like, hey, okay, now go ahead and, let's taxi out to the runway. And you went, wow, steering with my feet, this was really weird, but you kind of got used to it. And you probably at least assisted in the takeoff for your first lesson. Now let's look at a helicopter. Who did the pickup on that helicopter? Your instructor did. Who did the hovering out to the runway? Your instructor did. Who did that takeoff? Your instructor did. Why is that? Because there's a lot more to flying a helicopter, especially when you're close to the ground, than there is an airplane. Other factors. Helicopters tend not to have autopilots. So you can't just kind of kick back and do things. You need to get organized in your helicopter. You're flying solo. Oh, how do I even change the frequency on the radio? Some helicopters, you let go of the collective and it immediately starts to decay. Some of them, if you don't have a governor, the RPMs will decay unless you tighten up the friction on the throttle a little bit. So it is a lot harder to fly a helicopter. So it's not surprising that they have higher accident rates. And because of that, the FAA has an emphasis on aeronautical decision making for helicopters. Now, lest you think that it's just helicopters, there is a big emphasis on this in the fixed wing world as well. The biggest difference, honestly, between fixed wing and helicopters is that in the fixed wing world, it's mostly general aviation, where they're trying to get people to use these concepts in order to improve their safety record. If you look at the airlines, their safety record's pretty good. And that's one of the reasons why, if you look at commercial airplane pilots, they have a much lower accident rate. You look at a commercial helicopter pilot, well, he's not flying in the flight levels with an autopilot and all kinds of automation. He's possibly flying low to the ground into tight places with possibly bad weather and not a lot of stuff to help him out with that. So if you look at the statistics, the overwhelming majority of accidents are going to be attributed to pilot error, 80% or so. So by improving your decision making, you can improve your chances of not having an accident. All right, and as I said, I don't want to really get into the details of this chapter because this is something that is covered in Rod Machado's book. So that brings us to the end of the Helicopter Flying Handbook. Hopefully these little videos have been helpful. And as always, feel free to ask questions in class, and we will see you there.